a high-quality knowledge podcast for hitchhikers traveling the galaxy. This is Lab 42.
So if you've been scrolling through any global news feed lately, you've probably noticed a theme popping up in the defense world. There's a new heavyweight in town. It's South Korea.
Oh, absolutely.
We're seeing all these headlines, right? Selling hundreds of tanks to Poland, howitzers to Australia, fighter jets.
They call it K-Defense, and it is having a moment. I think they hit something like, what, $17 billion in exports recently? It's just massive.
It's huge.
But, you know, to really get why this is happening and to appreciate just how improbable this whole story is, we have to forget the shiny skyscrapers in Seoul for a minute.
Right.
We need to mentally delete the high-tech factories and just take a hard turn back to 1953.
1953, the end of the Korean War. And the source material we have for this deep dive is, well, it's pretty heavy. It doesn't describe a developing nation. The phrase it uses is a gray wasteland.
That phrase, it really stood out to me too. Built on ashes. You have to realize, in 1953, the industrial base wasn't just damaged, it was zero. Non-existent.
A clean slate in the worst possible way.
Over 1 million civilians dead or missing. The economy, gone. One of the poorest places on the entire planet.
So, okay, that's the mission for today. How do you bridge that gap? How on earth do you go from a pile of ashes and absolutely nothing in 53 to becoming what the sources call an iron fortress today?
And I think the key thing to understand is this wasn't some gradual, comfortable evolution.
No.
This was a frantic, terrifying scramble for survival.
Survival is the key word. And that brings us to a huge misconception about 1953 that we need to clear up right away.
Right. We say the war ended.
But it didn't. Not really. If you look at the armistice agreement, it was a suspension.
Exactly, a suspension of hostilities. Legally, the war is just on pause, and that wasn't some abstract idea. It created the DMZ, the demilitarized zone.
I was looking at the stats on the DMZ again, and it's honestly hard to wrap your head around the scale of it. It's this scar that just cuts the whole peninsula in half.
4 kilometers wide, 250 kilometers long.
To give you a mental image of that, the total area of that no man's land is about 1,000 square kilometers.
Which is big enough to swallow the entire country of Singapore.
Wow. Or, another visual I saw, the width alone, that 4 kilometers, is like laying 5 Central Parks side by side.
And filling them with landmines and barbed wire.
Yeah.
And 2 massive armies just staring at each other, ready to go.
So, in the years after the war, South Korea obviously needed a military to guard that line. They had the soldiers, they had the manpower. But the sources describe their military in the 50s and 60s as hollow.
Hollow is a really strong word, but it's accurate.
In what sense? Equipment.
In terms of, well, ownership,
Yeah.
sustainability. This brings us to a concept the sources call the golden handcuffs.
That's a great metaphor.
Perfect, right? The gold was the U.S. aid. Every single rifle, and we're talking old World War II M1 Garands, every bullet, every truck, it all belonged to the U.S. or the UN.
Even the command structure, the operation control.
That too. So let me get this straight. You're standing guard on literally the most dangerous border on Earth.
Right.
But you're holding a gun you don't own, with bullets you didn't make, following orders from a general who isn't Korean.
That's the handcuff part. The aid keeps you alive, that's the gold, but it stops you from building your own muscles.
Why build a factory when someone gives you this stuff for free? But there was always this fear in the background. What if the U.S. changes its mind? What if their priorities shift?
I mean, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
This wasn't just paranoia. This brings us to 1968.
The year of nightmares.
Yeah.
If you want to understand the psychology behind this whole drive, you have to get the trauma of 1968. It starts on January 21st, the Blue House raid.
This reads like a movie script. It's insane. 31 North Korean commandos cross the DMZ. They slip through the fences.
Big South Korean uniforms.
And they march straight into Seoul. Their mission, assassinate the president.
And they almost did it. They got as far as the Segamjeong Pass. If you know Seoul, that is practically on the front lawn of the presidential residence. A huge firefight right there in the streets.
The shock of that alone must have been
immense.
The enemy is in your driveway.
But it didn't stop there. 2 days later, literally 48 hours later, the USS Pueblo incident.
A U.S. spy ship gets hijacked by North Korea in international waters.
And everyone in Seoul is watching thinking, okay, here comes the superpower.
Right, unleash the fleet.
And the superpower did nothing. They were so bogged down in Vietnam, they couldn't risk opening a second front.
Then the next year, 1969, A U.S. spy plane gets shot down. Everyone on board killed.
And again, strategic patience. No retaliation.
So if you're a leader in Seoul, the calculation changes completely. You're thinking, they let their own ship get taken, their own plane get shot down. Are they really going to fight for us if the tanks roll south?
That was it, the wake-up call. The realization was, we're on our own.
And that feeling gets cemented by the Nixon shock.
The Nixon Doctrine, 1969, basically says, Asian defense by Asians.
Which is a very polite way of saying, good luck, you're on your own.
A lot of Asian leaders panicked. But President Park, the sources say he saw this through a very specific idiom, jutakdongsi.
Oh, right, the chicken and the egg.
Exactly. For a chick to hatch, it has to peck from the inside, but the mother hen has to peck from the outside at the same time. Park saw the U.S. pulling back not as abandonment, but as the signal, the mother hen pecking. It was time to break the shell from the inside.
Time to break the golden handcuffs.
Right. So the decision is made. We have to build our own weapons. But there's a problem, a huge one.
No factories, no blueprints.
And no experts. Not a single person in the country knew how to design a modern rifle, let alone a tank.
Which leads to the Agency for Defense Development, the ADD.
Created in 1970,
Yeah.
And the sources call it a ghost organization. It wasn't even on the official government chart.
They were hiding it from the U.S.
Yeah, which is kind of ironic. And the recruitment.
Right.
This is my favorite part of the story. You can't find rocket scientists in a country that's still struggling with, like, basic manufacturing. So where do you go?
You go find the ones who left. The brain drain.
The government sends these secret envoys out to the U.S., to Europe. They track down Korean scientists at top-tier places. We're talking people like Dr. Shim Muntaek. He was at NASA working on the Apollo missions.
Just think about that for a second. You are literally helping put a man on the moon.
Yeah.
The absolute peak of human engineering.
And someone knocks on your door and says, hey, come back to a country that barely has reliable electricity. We can't pay you NASA wages. We can't give you a fancy lab, but we need you.
What was the pitch?
Pure patriotism. We are poor because we are weak. Come help us protect our descendants. And a surprising number of them said yes. They gave up the American dream for a cot in a secret lab.
And when you say secret, you mean really secret.
Isolated. The sources say they had blackout curtains drawn 247, hiding from U.S. spy satellites. The U.S. actually didn't want them developing their own weapons. They were worried it would, destabilize things.
So you've got these elite scientists, basically prisoners in a lab, hiding in the dark.
And then in November 1971, the pressure cooker just explodes. It's called the Lightning Project.
The president calls them in and says,
What? Reverse engineer 7 types of weapons. Mortars, machine guns, rocket launchers. And have it done by the end of the year.
Wait, November to the end of December? That's, what, 40 days?
Roughly 40 days to build an entire arsenal from scratch.
With no blueprints, no raw materials.
Which brings us to the window sash incident. This story is just, it says everything about how desperate this was.
I had to read this twice. They were trying to make 3.5-inch rocket launchers.
Right. A rocket launcher barrel needs a specific, high-strength aluminum alloy. It has to handle incredible pressure and heat. Korea didn't make that alloy. It just didn't exist in the country.
They improvised.
They went to the local market and bought the aluminum used for architectural window sashes.
They're kidding. Like the frame around a bedroom window?
That's the stuff. Soft architectural aluminum. Using that for a weapon is terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
The risk of the whole thing just exploding in a soldier's face is astronomical.
They had a deadline.
They had a deadline. So the manufacturing process, the sources call it medieval blacksmithing.
It's not an exaggeration, is it?
Not at all. You have these PhDs from top U.S. universities holding hand files, manually grinding down metal parts because they don't have precision machine tools.
Just trying to guess the original measurements from worn-out American guns?
Exactly. So it all comes to a head on Christmas Eve, 1971, the Christmas gift. They present the prototypes.
And I've seen the picture of the first M2 carbine. It looks like a gun.
Oh, it looks the part. Wooden stock, metal barrel, check.
But looking like a gun and shooting like one are two very different things.
They take them to the firing range, and it's a complete and total disaster.
How bad are we talking?
10 carbines, only 1 fired correctly. A 90% failure rate.
Oh, wow.
It gets worse. They try to fix them by swapping in genuine U.S. parts. Only 6 of them would even accept the U.S. parts. The other 3 were made so badly, the dimensions were so off, that the official parts wouldn't even fit.
So the Lightning Project was a failure.
Functionally, yes, an absolute failure. But the sources, they call it a successful failure.
How so? Because they learned something.
Exactly, it was a diagnosis. Before this, they didn't even know what they didn't know. Now the gaps were crystal clear. Metallurgy, that was the window sash problem, standardization, the parts not fitting, and precision machining.
It forced a pivot. They realized they couldn't just copy the shape of a weapon. They had to understand the science inside it.
Which kicks off the dual-track strategy. This was very clever.
Track 1, licensed production.
Right. They sign a deal with Colt in the U.S. to make the M16 rifle legally. This was about learning the system of modern manufacturing.
But this was a huge culture shock for the Korean engineers.
A complete collision of philosophies. Korean manufacturing at the time was, close enough. If a part didn't fit, you'd hit it with a hammer. But then they ran into mil-spec, U.S. military specifications.
Which are famously brutal.
The U.S. inspectors rejected everything. A 1-degree temperature difference in the heat treatment, rejected. A 1,000th of an inch error, rejected.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly frustrating. But I guess that's how you learn quality control, the hard way.
It forces you to get it right. But while the factory was learning that lesson, Track 2 was happening back at the ADD, the secret research.
This is where they tried to figure out the weapon's soul, the material.
Yes. The U.S. gave them the M16 blueprints, but they held back the know-how. Specifically, they wouldn't tell them the recipe for the steel alloy used in the barrel.
Because if you know that, you can make any gun barrel, not just an M16.
It's the secret sauce. So the ADD scientists, they basically had to become alchemists. They made and destroyed hundreds of different alloy samples. Mix a batch, test it, watch it fail, mix another. They were reverse engineering the molecular structure of steel.
And they pulled it off.
By 1974, just 3 years after the window sash disaster, they produced a 100% domestically made M16. Every screw, every spring, every ounce of steel.
That's an incredible turnaround. And that set the template right. The ADD model, R&D leads, and mass production follows. It's how they still build K2 tanks today.
But there's one final piece of this puzzle that I think is maybe the most important takeaway for you, the listener. It was never just about guns.
You mean the economic spin-off?
Yes. President Park's grand strategy. Defense spending is usually seen as a black hole for money. You buy a missile, it goes boom, the money is gone.
Right.
But they saw it as seed money for the entire national economy.
The idea of peace-war conversion.
Exactly. If you build a factory that can make tanks, in peacetime, that same factory can make bulldozers. If you build a shipyard for warships, you can use it to build oil tankers for export.
And the tech itself spills over. It's not just the buildings.
Absolutely. Think about that barrel steel they agonized over. That deep knowledge of heat treatment and metallurgy didn't just stay in the gun factory. It flowed directly into the auto industry. The science behind a durable gun barrel is the same science you need for a car engine or a transmission.
So when we look at a company like Hyundai today, or the huge shipyards, there's a direct line back to those scientists in that blacked-out room.
The Iron Fortress wasn't just military, it was economic. The failures of the Lightning Project. That was the tuition fee they paid to become an industrial power.
It really reframes the whole story. It wasn't just rearming a country. It was about industrializing it, using defense as the engine.
And it was all driven by that raw, desperate survival instinct. When you have no choice, when the golden handcuffs are off and you're staring at that border all alone, you find a way.
And that, I think, leads us to the final thought we want to leave you with. The source material makes it so clear that this entire technological explosion, it was born from a fear of abandonment, the fear that no one else would come to help.
Which raises a really fascinating question for today. I mean, we're living in a time where geopolitics are shifting again, alliances feel less certain, the world feels unstable.
So is that raw survival instinct still the engine driving innovation in places like South Korea? Or, after all this success, has it evolved into something else entirely?
Something to think about.
That's it for this deep dive into the origins of K-Defense. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.